if that was your destination, welcome aboard. I'm Charlie Colgan. I'm Director of Research at the Center for the Blue Economy at Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. We are a small research operation primarily devoted to the economics of ocean and coastal areas. And a lot of the work that we do is on the development of the blue economy, both in the United States and around the world, and a lot on climate change and sea level rise adaptation. So the blue economy is a term that has reached a status of sufficient clarity that it is now a major motivator of action and interest around the world. It is also one of sufficient ambiguity that nobody knows quite what it is, and therefore people are perfectly willing to attach whatever it is they're doing to the term. I've been literally around the world in the past 9 months doing speeches on the blue economy on 6 continents. And it's a term that is, I have to say, extremely widely used around the world in developing countries and developed countries. It is, as ocean issues go, it is a hot topic in the world, except here. In the U.S., the term is largely unknown. And we're still struggling to, our center is still struggling to get people to understand it, but it's not a difficult concept. It is what all of the discussions about the ocean are all about, in terms of getting people to understand how to develop value from the oceans and to do so in a sustainable way, both in terms of environmental sustainability and in terms of the distributional equities associated with social goals. So it's not a difficult concept, but it has its various flavors and its various challenges. The panel this afternoon, and I have to confess that we're short one panelist. Liz Taylor, who is Sylvia Earle's daughter, she's the daughter that Dr. Earle referred to in the opening session today, who works in the field of developing exploration technologies. Well, her company has had a revetment collapse at their facility in Alameda, California, and she is attending to that part of the blue economy today rather than being on our panel. And I'm sorry about that, but sometimes the ocean, as we all know, sometimes the ocean has the last word about where you can be and plan. Our panel today is designed to explore different aspects and different challenges of the blue economy. I think we will have adequate time for discussion and questions afterwards. I'm going to introduce the first person, and I'll introduce them as we go. The first person I want to introduce is Dr. John Virdin from the Nicholas Institute at Duke University. John and I are colleagues on, have done blue economy type studies of a number of different types. John comes from a background with the World Bank and has a good sense of how the world is evolving in its view of the blue economy, and how what lessons we can learn about that for the situation here in the U.S. So, John, I think use the mic.
Okay.
I think more for the camera than anything else.
All right, will do. And thank you, Charlie. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to break my streak speaking after lunch. The last time I did, I'll just tell you, I was giving a lecture to some alumni from the university, and it was on a boat, so it was gently rocking, it was very relaxing. And I looked out at one point, and I literally saw people with like their head back, mouth open, asleep. So I'm thinking that I can break that streak today. Hopefully I will be more interesting than that for the moment. But it's very nice to get to speak and join this panel. And I just want to talk, I guess, a little bit about what I think of with when we talking about the blue economy, what I've seen in discussions with governments, why I think it matters, why I'm still sometimes not sure really if it does matter for ocean policy, but a little bit of the history of this concept and where at least I see governments around the world asking about it more and more, even if, as Charlie mentioned, not so much here in the U.S. But I think, and it's kind of feels a bit strange for me to be talking about this, since most of what I'm talking about is work that Charlie's developed over the years and pioneered. But I think it's important to distinguish between two different things when we're talking about the blue economy, at least today, for we have this discussion. One is what I think of as the ocean economy, the fact that just in pure economic terms, within the last decade or so, we have started measuring more and more what is this group of economic activity that's associated with the ocean. It's either drawing from the ocean as an input into what it does, or affecting the ocean as an output of what it does. And more, we've started measuring the ocean economy as a segment of the national economy, domestic economy, global economy. There was a note that just came out that suggested the ocean economy is about the seventh biggest, largest economy in the world, the size of France or California. Charlie's looked at this in the U.S., measured what does the U.S. ocean economy look like as a discrete segment. We've done it now in a few states, California, Mississippi, North Carolina. So we started trying to measure exactly, if you were to lump all this economic activity associated with the ocean together, how big would this measure be? Is it a way to get policymakers to really notice the ocean as a contributor to the global economy, to the national economy, what have you? And I think it's actually, at least in my experience, has been reasonably effective in getting attention of people thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't realize there were this many jobs associated with, in some way, shape, or form, the ocean. I didn't realize there were this much revenues or this much GDP linked in some way, shape, or form to the ocean. So that's been, I think, useful and interesting to see over the last decade or so, increasingly. Then something that I think has been interesting to watch even more is this discussion of the blue economy. And for those who maybe don't know or haven't seen it, at least as I understand it, this blue economy concept came around the Rio reunion, Rio summit in 2012, where essentially people were saying, hey, we've been talking about the green economy now for about 10 years. What about the ocean? Can we what does a green economy in a blue world look like? And since that time, I think it's kind of caught fire. I've seen there's been in 2013, the government of Mauritius said we're going to reorient our entire growth strategy around the blue economy. We're going to become the world's first ocean state. There was a global ocean summit about the blue economy in The Hague in 2014. We've seen Indonesia has put this forward as part of their national growth strategy. China has done the same. The EU has put forward a blue economy strategy. In 2014, at the summit of small island developing states, the blue economy was a fundamental piece of that. So it's been a key segment of countries' policies since really now for the last 5 years. Doctor? I think so, yes.
Okay. I'm Elizabeth Taylor. I'm my mom. Sorry.
No, thanks so much for joining.
Sorry.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to continue a little bit about this, I think, at least just from my limited perspective, it's been pretty fascinating to watch countries put forward this blue economy term and start to orient not just their own, within ministries of fisheries, ministries of environment, their policies, but much of their economic growth strategies around this idea of the blue economy. And they've meant from what we can see, very, very different things between different countries. Indonesia's basically been talking about how can we get more economic growth out of our ocean space. The European Union has been more balanced about how can we promote more economic growth from our ocean, but how can we also protect the status of ecosystems. Then in just the last year or so, ministers of finance in the Caribbean came to us and were asking, what does this blue economy concept mean? Can we orient our economic strategies around that? And so from island states, from archipelagos like Indonesia, Europe, China, it seems to be within countries' policies more and more the blue economy concept, or however they're defining it, the term, has been popping up more and more. And so I think from my perspective at least, it's been really interesting to see the prevalence of this term, the way it's been defined every which way. I can see from some saying, well, this means economic growth that takes into account the carrying capacity of the ecosystems, to others saying this just means much more economic activity in the ocean, much more economic growth from our seas. So it's really been an incredibly wide range of ways that countries have been interpreting this concept. But it has become, as Charlie mentioned, in policies around the world, maybe not here in the U.S., but more and more in countries' growth strategies, this seems to be an animating concept, this idea of the blue economy, however they are defining it. And so we've been batting around back and forth, is this a fad? Is this substantive? What does this actually mean in terms of the way countries are governing the use of their ocean space? And it seems, frankly, I've been sort of waiting to see, okay, is this going to sort of have its day and become something that passes, and now we're talking about something else. But countries, ministries of finance, ministries of economy, continually keep asking about how can we develop strategies for the blue economy, again, with different understandings of what they may think that means, but it continues to seems to drive attention from policymakers to their ocean space. So from my perspective, that's been, I think over the last 5 years, a phenomenon that has been really interesting in a lot of discussions with governments, and something that we're seeing more and more. So maybe I'll stop there for the moment, for that, but just as an intro about where we're seeing this popping up.
So we have had our fourth member join us, at least by relative.
The genes are here.
The genes are here, and the knowledge is here, though from a perhaps different perspective. Dr. Sylvia Earle needs no introduction, and so I will give her none.
Well, you should be introducing Liz Taylor, the real Elizabeth Taylor, my daughter, who has all her life been subjected to, well, what can I say, surrounded with the ocean community, the science community, and also some years ago I started a venture. I'm not an engineer, I've never been to business school, but took the leap of faith as a scientist to work with engineers to start deep ocean engineering, to design and develop tools, if you will, submersibles, robots, whatever, for access to the sea. And Liz, I have 3 children, but she, more than the other 2, got swept up in being a part of the action and, quotes, interned, work for free, slave labor at deep ocean engineering for years during her teen years. And we launched hundreds of little underwater robots as deep ocean engineering, remotely operated vehicles. And we're successful in starting the development of manned or woman submersibles, human-occupied vehicles, with an ultimate vision of being able to go anywhere in the ocean. That requires going to the deepest place in the ocean, where so far a few robots, one from Japan that's lost at sea. Woods Hole had a robot that did go to the deepest part of Mariana Trench, but it too is lost at sea. But the ones that have not lost and actually brought their human occupants back were the Trieste in 1960, 2 people, and in 2012, James Cameron. After I was asked to go to NOAA to be the chief scientist in 1990, I abandoned deep ocean engineering. But when I came back a couple of years later and started a new company, I actually partnered with my daughter to begin that venture. Neither one of us is an engineer, but again, by teaming up with one, she married one actually, who now runs the operations for the new entity, Deep Ocean Exploration and Research. And we've gathered around us a number of little brain trust of people whose objective is to harness the blue economy, that is to develop technologies for access to the sea. It doesn't imply exploitation or exploration. It's just, look, here's some tools to be used. However, right now, we are the best equipped generation in history to explore the ocean, but there's so much more to do. We've only mapped maybe 10% of the ocean with the kind of accuracy that exists for the Moon and Mars and Jupiter. The ability to send people 7 miles, it's not very far. It is when you're going down. Millions of people travel 7 miles in the sky, but getting under the surface and coming back, that's the tricky part. One-way trips are really easy. As Don Walsh writes out, he was one of the first 2 to go to the deepest place. And the company, Deep Ocean Exploration and Research, the acronym for that is DOER, which is what the company strives to do. A little piece of California, where the company is based, actually went to the deepest part of the ocean. They built the manipulator arm on Jim Cameron's sub, and it had a nice Rolex on the wrist, demonstrating that there are timepieces that can go under the most stressful kind of circumstances in the world, 16,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, and still function happily. So I use this just as an introduction to where we are in time, I guess, because the idea of being around right now with access to the sea is unprecedented, and yet is the least known part of the planet. And when you look at it from the surface, and most people do look at the ocean from the surface, I feel privileged to have had a chance to spend thousands of hours under the surface. I've lived underwater 10 times in little underwater laboratories, and I've used more than 30 little submarines, and I've had a hand in crafting, variations on the theme, although I'm not an engineer, but as somebody who uses equipment to be able to help guide the process and bring some insight into, so you can get there, but what do you want to do when you get there? What kinds of actions do you want to achieve? So if the idea of looking at most of the planet, the blue part, with how do we capitalize, how do we monetize the ocean, the blue economy? First, I think access is critical. You have to know what's there. You have to be able to get to where the place is that you want to go. But fundamentally, all that is relatively straightforward, and in the process, with legions of little autonomous underwater vehicles, underwater drones, if you will, mapping is finally getting some attention. I think Google has had something to do with that, as well as the navies of the world, realizing got to know where you are. We have now satellites up in the sky to help guide us where we are on the surface and underwater, but it's just like we're a part of maybe the most exciting time in all of human history because of access not only to the skies above, but to the ocean in new ways with new knowledge. So here's the thing, the really hard part. When you think about monetizing the blue part of the planet, folding it into our economy in a more significant way, to, first of all, ask about what is it that we're looking for, the value. It isn't just what you put in the bank. It's what is the ocean worth to us, not just in terms of bankable revenue, not just dead fish by the pound or ton, not even tourism dollars. It's what is the ocean worth to humankind? When I was at NOAA, I got into serious trouble because I challenged the concept of how we value fish. NOAA includes the National Marine Fisheries Service. But here's the thing. A live fish has a zero accounting base. A dead fish, that's when you can put a price tag on it. You have to catch it, weigh it, take it to market, then you can sell it. But swimming around in the ocean, it's free. It's free. All you have to do is go get them. And it gives us I would say, an incomplete picture of what the ocean is worth when the creatures that live there that are valued when they're dead have no value when they're alive. It's like looking at a tree only in terms of board feet of lumber. A dead tree, oh yeah, you can measure that. A live tree, well, most people see value in trees and other things that they come to know on the land. But a dead tree, well, you can cut that up and sell it. Dead fish, the same way. Dead shrimp, lobsters, whatever it is. So I think as we explore new ways to exploit the ocean responsibly, we have to do a big calculation, recalculation of what the ocean is really worth to us. And if you like to breathe, you'll listen up. Because things that really provide the basis, not just of our economy, not just health and not just security, but our existence, anchored in the state of the ocean that heretofore has been really kind of off limits because we have not had access. We've not had the ability to get to the deepest part of the oceans, to take big mining machines and plow the ocean floor. But I've been personally a witness to not just clear-cutting forests on the land, but clear-cutting fish from the ocean, so that 90% of many of the big fish are already gone. And sadly, when we look at how we anticipate future extractions from the ocean, we don't start back 50 years ago. We tend to start like 10 years ago. And that's the new base, the shifting baseline that scientists point to as one of our slippery slopes that we need to think about. What kind of a world do we want? Do we want one where we have to see the price of fish go from pennies a pound to like the $1 million, the $1.7 million tuna that's sold at the Tokyo Fish Market? Because they're so rare, the price goes up as the quantity goes down. And imagine if you had to make a tuna fish from scratch. No amount of money would quite do it. So, where am I going with all this? The blue economy. How can we use the ocean, as my friend Carl Safina says, without using it up? How can we use the ocean without just thinking in terms of mining or extraction of wildlife? How can we use the ocean to benefit the people who live, all of us live by the ocean. If you think about it, there is no ocean, there is no us. Or an ocean in trouble means we're all in trouble. So we're all really dependent on successful management of, quotes, the blue economy. How do we use the ocean with respect to the creatures who live there, the processes that shape the way the world works. It isn't just about how can we access 20,000 feet so we can scrape up the bottom of the ocean and extract the handful of rare earths that we're seeking to power our cell phones and our handy computers, but can we think of other ways? Can we look at the ocean with new eyes? Can we think of what's really valuable about the ocean? Can we take a page from the Cayman Islands, from their book of the economy, where they have put a price tag on every little stingray that people used to run away from or run toward with something to kill them because they thought they were dangerous vermin. Now they value them, according to a recent calculation, of $500,000 per year per ray to the economy, because crazy people such as I have been convinced that it's really fun to go to the Cayman Islands and walk in barefoot among these creatures that everybody used to be afraid of, and cuddle them, and you pay for it, the privilege of being slathered with stingrays. Or how about the president of Palau, Tommy Ramingasau, who has convinced his people that sharks are more valuable alive than dead. There's a big market for shark fin soup these days, and for shark steaks. You could be, like a great white shark if you eat great white shark. It's a macho meal. But there, the price tag is more like $1 million per shark to the economy of Palau because of crazy people such as I who will pay big bucks for the privilege of going out to be swimming among sharks. But it's more than that. The value, the blue economy, we now are beginning to make a connection with blue carbon. And every shark, every little piece of plankton, every mangrove tree, all these creatures, they're all carbon-based units, so are all of us. But it's the carbon cycle that is largely driven by the ocean, by the same process that generates more than half of the oxygen in the atmosphere above, also supplies that oxygen into the ocean below. It captures carbon. And that carbon on the land, trees with their little leaves, photosynthesize, capture the carbon, generate oxygen, store the carbon in their roots and in the soil and in the insects and the birds and all the things that chew on the leaves, and they become part of the animals. They become ultimately a part of the soil or another animal as the food chains go. It's the carbon cycle. It's a living cycle. It's not just kind of a physical process. It's definitely a biological one. And in the ocean, carbon is alive. And ultimately, when big sharks do what all living things do eventually, they die, go to the bottom of the ocean, the deep sea is the great carbon reservoir of the planet. It just is. Or Florida, big carbonate chunk. But with an acidifying ocean, that carbon is gradually melting away, or not getting formed in the first place as something that can be enduring. So, the key is, as we look to an enduring blue economy, to think about value, not just price, not just the normal way of considering the economy. And my poor daughter, Liz, has been swept up into this. So it's not just about engineering solutions for access to the sea. It's also engineering access to the hearts and minds of people everywhere. And so she spends a lot of time with kids. She actually is responsible for she and her husband Ian, it takes two, have two children. And so they're growing up in the midst of all this as well. They're passing the knowledge, every generation benefiting, one hopes, from what has been learned before. And right now, those of us who are around, and the kids in opportunity that has never been possible facing civilization before. But It's not just the technological access, although that's part of the solution to how do we get from where we are to a better place. It's recognizing that the world is blue, largely, and for the first time in history, we can begin to see it comprehensively, not just what we can sell from extracting oil, gas, fish, minerals, whatever, and not just transportation, although that's a big deal. Most of our products that get around the world go by ship. It's a big part of the blue economy. How do we do that more responsibly and connect it all together, knowing that the highest priority has to be to keep the blue part safe? As a doctor would say, first, do no harm. So how do you use the ocean without using it up? How do you use the ocean intelligently so that we can magnify what we think of as the economy, our revenue stream, what keeps us in groceries and all of that, but keep the blue goose happy. You can extract a few blue eggs from time to time, but whatever you do, first priority, you've got to take care of the goose.
Are you going
I'm
to
done.
stay around for a while?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So let's do our other two panelists, and then we'll take some time for questions. I'm going to let Laurie Wilson introduce herself. And then I'll introduce the last panelist.
So I'm going to talk to you about how to keep the blue goose happy. I'm Laurie Wilson. I'm co-founder of the Blue Ocean Network, and originally it was all about scuba diving. We ran a dive travel trade site. We helped educate businesses on how to run businesses that met the needs of customers but also protected the ocean. And we had to do it in a backhanded way because all they wanted to know was how to make money. So the good news is that we're no longer the dive travel business news. We're the Blue Ocean Network because our customers have expanded to they're now scientists who are part of the Blue Ocean Network because they want to work with businesses. We have nonprofits who are part of it. They want to work with scientists and businesses. We have students. Students are a growing part of our community. And it all really goes right back to what do you love? What do you love? And we believe that if you love the ocean, you are in the best position to protect it. We believe that businesses that are connected to the ocean have a vested interest to protect it. And together between consumers and businesses, we can change the world. That's what we believe. So it's such an exciting thing to be involved in right now because just in the last 3 years, even since you were on the summit, Sylvia, we run a yearly summit. And even since last year, the changes that have happened to the hearts and minds of people to want to become part of the change. So I wanted to talk to you about some of those trends that are happening that are definitely impacting those who are closest to the ocean and those who are the most likely to become that 1%, as Ralph Nader says, or that 10%, as Louis said in the last presentation. One of the big changes is it's, you would think that sustainability would be a big driver because the blue economy is supposed to talk about sustainability. Well, one of the big drivers is this market. It's an actual market, and it's called the LOHAS market. It's the lifestyle of health and sustainability. Has anybody ever heard of it? No. In Asia knows about it. They even have residences called LOHAS 1 and LOHAS 2 because it's very, very trendy. Youngsters, they are LOHAS, as are empty nesters. Sylvia's a LOHAS. I am. We all are. We're all LOHAS. Now, in the broader scheme of things, customer-driven companies that are selling products, they're desperate to have a relationship with customers like we do in the ocean industries where we're dealing with marine tourism. They would so much love to have this tightness that our businesses have with their people. And it's because our customers are LOHAS. It's the most difficult market to get at. And we're all it. Can you believe it? This is why business is going to change the world. And it's the business that is run by, it's operating based on this growing market of low house. Cuts across demographics, cuts across geographics, race, and how much you make. Because you've got kids, students, they just don't buy because they know it's going to impact their footprint. So it's an incredible thing that's happening that is not even discussed, and especially in North America because nobody knows what a low house is. So, but Europe knows it, and Asia knows it, but we don't know it. So I think that is one of the incredible driving forces in a blue economy is this low house market that no one really knows how to identify, but it just so happens that the epicenter is right here, right now at this summit. It's really that's what's going on. Another trend I wanted to talk about, I got a bunch of trends and I was told I have to be careful about not going over time. One of the other trends that is happening is the community-led development. Now, I work all over the world, and as you were saying about all these different areas like Mauritius and all of these island nations are very, very interested in becoming blue economy oriented because they live in very fragile environments. But they know that getting a big grant from the World Bank is probably not going to help them as much as the community behind it. And this is exactly what they're saying on the plenary session this morning, is that we can have all of these big goals and have big money going in, but if we don't get grassroots, nothing's going to happen. So you see how is this constant mirroring happening. So in the marine-based tourism industry, they're realizing the only way to protect their environment, which is their cash cow, it's their blue goose, the only way to protect it is to get involved with their community. So the resorts that we deal with and the liveaboards that we deal with, they are very much embedded in their local community. They help them with desalination, they help them with waste reduction and all these types of things. So they know it directly impacts their environment. It's very exciting that these businesses are taking a leadership role because it impacts them. Now, if we were having this discussion 10 years ago, this would not be happening. 10 years ago, these guys were all in it for the bucks. They didn't even know who their local representative was unless they had to get a work permit, signed off on. That's how they operated. But now it's a completely different story. They used to look at the ocean as a backdrop to their business, and now it is a partner. The ocean is the partner, and it's not silent. It's no longer silent. So they are stepping in and making some tremendous headway, just running their businesses completely differently. Now, Sylvia knows that I've been trying to get the dive industry involved in sustainability, and that's like, it's like, oh my gosh. So don't even try in the U.S., right? Don't even try. So we've been going to Asia.
Go with the divers.
Go the divers. So we went to Asia, and Sylvia was in Asia this year as well, and the theme was climate change. Do you think that would ever happen in North America? No. So the theme of the dive show was climate change. And they had climate heroes from all over the world there doing presentations on how they are attacking climate change. And there are 60,000 people at this consumer show in Singapore. I mean, this is the stuff that's happening. It's not happening here. No. But this and the businesses that showed up, Lauren and I ran a workshop for sustainable business in conjunction with Green Fins, which is a UNEP program, it's the United Nations Environment Program, and one of the representative scientists from UNEP. And we had 50 people in the room who were so excited that they were no longer alone. They could talk about what they were doing. We had scientists, nonprofits, we had people who identify themselves as citizen scientists. Isn't that cool? Yeah. This has never happened before. So, and then we have all these different businesses that were involved, resorts, liveaboards, dive shops, etc., tourism reps, shows and events, like media were there, and they were all in their little groups, and they were all sharing information about how they were going to make their businesses more sustainable. How media was not going to, show people sitting in basket or barrel sponges. How, I wore this because this is what they did for their presentation. Everybody who was an exhibitor or speaker got one of these. These are the most beautiful. I mean, they're gorgeous. You never want to throw this out. So no one is. Everyone took them. They were hoping to get them back so they could use them next year. They didn't get any back. Everybody took them. And then they've got these badges that are, they're totally recyclable. In Asia, and there's no plastic. So, I mean, it's possible. It's the will, right? It's the will. So I don't want to go on too much about what's happening with business. I just want to give you some tremendous hope that it may not look that there's much hope here, but in other areas of the world where they're being directly impacted by food security issues, climate change, rising sea levels, and their businesses rely on tourism, they are on the case. They're blue economy. And they're showing tremendous leadership. And leadership is that's what we're seeing right now. Everybody's a leader. And at this Singapore show, they were talking to people about how to be a leader. I mean, this is we're just starting the conversation here. They're already on it. So there's tremendous amount of hope. So don't despair. Business is here.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Kris Hollen, who's the Senior Vice President, Chief Conservation Officer at the National Aquarium.
So good afternoon, and I am the CCO at the National Aquarium, and I think some of you heard John Racanelli this morning, the CEO of the National Aquarium, and one of the things that you may or may not know about the aquarium world is that we are very much transitioning, zoos and aquariums are in general, but particularly aquariums, from really being attractions to moving in more thoughtfully and intentionally into the conservation space. So it's both an exciting time for us and an interesting time for us. And so as part of that, just to give you a little bit of context, we at the National Aquarium, about a year ago, we underwent a process to really look at what should guide our conservation work. So we came out with 3 overarching themes. You heard John mention one of them this morning, and those themes are urban conservation and diversity. We, after all, are an urban aquarium, and with that comes some inherent responsibility. Our second theme is climate change and resiliency, and our third theme is ocean and human health. And so really looking at it as a system. And when you think, and the other aspect that we put into that was that while those themes will guide our work and all the choices we make at the aquarium, the other aspect is that we really want to take a triple bottom line approach. So when we look at our work, we want to look at it through the lens of, not just the environment, but social justice and economic development. So in looking at the economics, we started thinking about, you'll see that with some of the examples. I'm going to give you 2 examples of that may or may not contribute to what the definition of the blue economy, but this is at very much a local level. So I'll just say the first issue we sort of looked at was plastics. It's a big, obviously that's one of the most pressing issues for the ocean today is plastics. So we thought, well, what can we do in the space of plastics? And I think you heard John mention this morning that we are now a single-use plastics-free aquarium. But we looked at it, we really thought we need to get at this through the market. And so there was a concerted effort nationally that I'll mention in a minute, but really to think about what is the theory of change here. So, we're going to raise awareness to the issue of plastic pollution, but then we want to create a demand for alternative packaging. We want to create a demand for alternative products. We do not want any more of the responsibility of cleaning up. I mean, we're going to still take it. The National Aquarium is actually the Maryland affiliate of the International Coastal Cleanup. So we do a lot of cleanups. I mean, we take a lot of people out there to see exactly what's happening on those beaches. But, how do we create a demand in the market? And then after that, would presumably come policy change. So if we think about that, that's our concept of theory of change. So as aquariums, thinking about how can we make a dent, we are looking at making a commitment with all the aquariums across the country, or at least many of the larger ones, on removing single-use plastics. So National Aquarium, proud to say it's a little Self-serving. We are the lead aquarium on getting all the plastics out. We have, if you come into our aquarium, there are no more water bottles. You will not get any soda bottles, juice bottles. They're all gone. In fact, all our utensils, plates, lids, cups are all compostable. In fact, even our popcorn bags are compostable. And if you think that was easy for our business operations manager to call the popcorn guy and say, we want compostable bags, really? I mean, we're ahead of the food and beverage industry. They are trying to catch up, as many of you probably know. So they're like, you want what? Oh yeah, and we also want a cotton candy bag that's compostable too, if you don't mind. And so, put that all in there. But it's creating opportunities. And, and then our next thing for our business manager was, all right, so let's find somebody, now we got to get a composter. You'd think that'd be easy. It's not easy. There's another new business that's coming forward. We have, sort of an entrepreneur startup that's going to work with us because we called the zoo, the Maryland Zoo, and thought, well, they've got to have a composter. We'll use theirs. They don't have one. So it was just, again, it's just creating these new markets. And what we're finding is that as we've gone through this process is that, obviously we want to do what's right for the ocean. And we're messaging to the guests that this is due to the ocean. This is why we're doing this. So hence, getting back a little bit to the blue economy, we're very much making the link. But we do need to stay in business, right? And we get revenue from all the concessions. So that's a key component. But what we have found is that we put in drinking water fountains that, and now sell reusable water bottles. So in the last 4 years, we have sold 65,000 reusable water bottles. It's always consistently one of our top 3 sellers. So, we're not losing revenue as a result. We have sold 182,000 fountain sodas in compostable cups. We now have, as John mentioned this morning, more lines, more products are coming back from Pepsi that were not in there before. So, there's an opportunity here to, you start in with people complaining, oh, you can't do that, but there actually you can create markets. Our retail store has just been completely upgraded so that we've reduced in our retail store most of all the plastics in there, and we now have our carpet squares that are used with, made from discarded and refurbished fishing nets from the Philippines. So, we're trying to move forward, and this again is creating opportunities for new products, new entrepreneurs to come on the scene. So I think, that's just one example. And when I say all the aquariums, John mentioned a little bit this morning, the Aquarium Conservation Partnership is a 2-year, it's in the pilot stage, but it's 19 of the major aquariums around the country have gotten together and they realized that if we message at the same time, we have a real power. If we message at the same time, we can conceivably reach 25 million people. And the real key there is 25 million general consumers. Because, most of us, I come from the conservation community, we talk to, most of us in this room, we are the choir, we all agree. And, that's not America, obviously. So, and at aquariums, one of the good, the advantage you have there is that we have a lot of people who come into the aquarium where it's raining, it's Saturday, the kids are screaming, it's an opportunity to reach people. And that's what we're able to do and that's why we're directly linking it back. Our other one, because I know we want to be a little bit time sensitive, is that you will see from let me back up from it. The ACP, the Aquarium Conservation Partnership, you will see them in June, July, we'll be coming out with some consistent messaging for the next several months on plastic pollution and connection to the ocean. So look for that around the July timeframe. You'll see all the aquariums starting with very similar look and feel of messaging. And they're also making commitments to remove plastic as well. But the other one is aquaculture. So as we've heard, our fish stocks are depleted. We know that we in the United States, we import over 90% of our seafood, and yet our Commerce Secretary says we're going to be a net exporter in the future. We'll see how that actually works. But what we've looked at is, again, with the blue economy, what can we do as an aquarium? And thinking about the seafood industry and aquaculture is that we are going to really start educating people on responsibly farmed commercial aquaculture. We think that is, clearly it's got to be wild caught, but it's really going to be farmed. Everything else is farmed. We need to be looking at farmed fish And we've been doing messaging in the aquarium to realize that a lot of people's perceptions of aquaculture are inaccurate from the way a lot of it now that's responsibly raised is being done. Most people still have very negative perceptions, and this is an area where we feel that we can do some education. And as you see, when you come into an aquarium or a zoo and people ask you questions, they're doing research on you. We consider it a living laboratory. We know exactly where you go, how you go, what you think when we're talking to you. So, just to give you a heads up, we're kind of stalkers when you come into the aquarium. But it's like it's a living laboratory, and that's where we're getting information. And so we have teamed up with some retailers, and you'll start to see that from us near the end of this year. Really trying to think that's where we can help with the blue economy as well, is that this is an industry that should start to tip at some point in the United States, because it's one of the most sustainable forms of protein, and it can't just be wild caught anymore. So with that, those are our 2 case studies that I just wanted to offer at a local level of where we're getting some data to show that, we can really help the ocean and keep people economically viable as well.
Thanks. I think the panel has left us with 3 kind of takeaways. First, the economic value of the ocean is more than what we take out of it. It's also what we leave in it. Second, the blue economy is not just about constraints on what we do. There's an enormous opportunity in the blue economy to make money. And third, the rest of this world gets it, not so much here. So if you want to challenge going forth from here, it's good to talk about the marine conservation and all of the things that we normally talk about this. But the blue economy represents real opportunities that people ought to be paying attention to more than they do. With that, we'll open up for questions.
Yes, did somebody say that they were doing or interested in oyster aquaculture? Was that?
Well, I said aquaculture in
Okay,
general.
but I just was curious because a couple of years ago I became really interested, and so we started working with somebody, and we live here in the area, and so on the Chesapeake Bay, learning to farm, and I've got a 15-year-old daughter over there that's been in conservation work doing, much like your daughter, kind of slave labor for years and years everywhere we stop. The car's loaded with things to do cleanups, like plastic, not plastic, but, garden gloves and reusable grocery shopping, bags and things like that. And so recently we've started with the ocean aquaculture, especially oysters, trying to find something, and we're new at this, but I'm just curious if in anybody's area how that's being received by people as an industry that can bloom, because from what we see, it's like the cure. We're kind of crazy, especially me with my attitude, but it just seems like that's the cure, is if everybody would grow oysters, then the water would be in much better condition.
Sylvia,
Well, if Liz were here, she would tell you about an alliance that DOER has with a group in Alameda to restore oysters to the bay, but not to eat them, but to restore the bay
Right.
by restoring the oysters. And you might be familiar with the Billion Oyster Project in New York. Again, for the same reason, there used to be billions of oysters in the waters around New York City.
In the East Coast.
And we ate them. Oh my goodness, they're so tasty. We ate almost all of them, and the same is true in Chesapeake Bay. I think maybe 2% remain from what was there when my father was a kid.
Yeah, I can't eat them anymore.
No, well, when you think about what oysters eat, you sure you want to eat oysters when they filter out all that plastic, those microplastics? They do a great job of doing that, and then you eat them? Well, yum yum. But anybody who has an aquarium knows that you have to be mindful of the filtration system, and we have neglected that. We just didn't know. We just plain did not know how important the living system, the clams, the oysters, the razor clams, the crabs, they're the cleanup crew, recycling the phosphates, the nitrates, the gunk that's there, and turning it into crab or clam or oyster. And it's a process that took a long time to get into place. And 400 years ago, when John Smith came to the Chesapeake Bay, the oysters were huge and they were 80 years old. Nobody had disturbed them. No primate had disturbed them before.
You can see through the water.
Yeah, and they filtered the whole contents of the bay in a few days, and today, not so much. So, in the ocean, generally, looking at it as a living system. So, it's, you think about the monkey with the violin. Here's this beautiful instrument that could make wonderful music, and the monkey doesn't know what to do with it because he just doesn't know. It's not that he's dumb, he just doesn't know. We didn't know how to use the ocean. We're getting better about how to use the ocean so that it can make beautiful music and we don't have to destroy it in the process. Raising oysters and closed systems on the land, to whether you're doing a really hot aquarium, home aquarium business, which is really big stuff. I mean, I subscribe to the aquarium magazines, and I'm fascinated by not only what a big business, I don't know what the numbers are really, but it's amazing to take the pressure off wild coral reef fish, but to learn how to grow them. The little clownfish, that was a breakthrough. You can cultivate them. The home aquarists are beginning to really make some breakthroughs about raising coral. The first aquariums, the public aquariums that I visited, Steinhardt, and in San Francisco and New England Aquarium, they had plastic plants and plastic sponges. And when Disney put in their big Living Oceans thing in Florida, in Orlando, everything except the fish and the turtles, and they had some dolphins at the time, were artificial. And I challenged the head of the aquarium in San Francisco, Earl Harold, years ago. He said, well, why don't you have invertebrates? Why don't you think like an ocean? What does it take to keep them alive? And he said, well, it's just difficult. And I said, well, fish are difficult. Why don't you just have plastic fish? And make it all really easy. But the home aquarists have cracked those problems. They have really contributed enormously with biological filtration, with learning how to think of it about an ecosystem approach. And it's a really unusual public aquarium these days that does not really have invertebrates, even sea urchins and starfish. They're really sensitive, but they're there, and it's also big business.
Heidi.
So, speaking of blue economy from John, your first opening section on it, you talked about all these countries around the world that are trying to incorporate how to value it and how to include it in their growth strategy, I think is how you worded it. So I'm wondering, how can we turn the tide here?
Right.
What kind of strategies might we try to employ, or is there any group out there, additionally, that is trying to get that kind of picture to our Congress and to our leaders? I just don't. I'm not familiar with if anybody's doing that and what those stories look like for us.
I'll let others add to it. I mean, within the U.S., I'm not sure, but I will say just because a number of these countries around the world are talking about the blue economy, it may not always be with anything remotely approaching conservation in mind. And I think that's what's been one of the interesting things. You'll see a lot of countries are basically saying, well, we have more ocean space than we do land. How can we monetize more of it? We've exhausted sources of economic growth on land. How can we grow in the water? That's what the blue economy seems to mean. And I've been sort of scratching my head to say, is this whole concept of the application of the blue economy in these countries' strategies, is this going to be a net win for the ocean and
Right.
ocean environment or a loss. I mean, as Dr. Earle mentioned, I mean, just doing no harm is a start, but ideally, this could be a net win in countries' policies. And it's not evident to me yet, but at least I'm kind of come around after a few years of talking with some of these governments to the idea of anything, at least the fact that this is focusing people's attention to the way that they use the ocean and the potential of the ocean, and it opens up a space for us to have a conversation with people about all the different values that ocean ecosystems might provide in ways that aren't being accounted for on the books in the past, and things that we hadn't thought of as, you know, the way you're doing your accounting actually might need to change, and are there ways that you can do your accounting that might lead to a much different perspective on this. So I'll just close to say, you mentioned one thing that might change it. I think a lot of colleagues feel like actually, and Charlie could say more because he's done so much of this, is the way that countries are keeping their economic books and doing their accounting.
So this sounds like that Hazel Henderson type of work I heard of decades ago too, if I remember the same person, maybe it's not quite the same, I don't know her stuff, but where she tried to talk about that sense that, as I understood it, the economic value of having certain resources, and then other countries that are more wealthy, like the U.S. might actually pay poorer countries to maintain those rainforests, for instance, because we all benefit from it. We have some benefit from that, but I just haven't seen
Like
that.
rainforests are subsidized in a way. to be kept up.
Right.
So I'll just
Yeah.
add quickly that what you just asked about is the work that my center does.
Yeah.
And all of our work is with countries outside the United States.
Well, two-part question kind of related to that.
Have it in this.
And then over here.
Well, Laurie, you mentioned divers and the difference. So why is it that divers in Singapore have a different view of climate change than divers in the United States? And second part to that, if it's really about some people in this culture not appreciating science, is that what's really underneath that? And if so, why would there be some people against science in this country?
First of all, it's politics.
We only have 5 minutes.
It's just politics. The rest of the world doesn't think that climate change is an issue. It's happening, right? But it's politics here. So that's the nutshell. The second thing is that in order to make sure you think it's all about the politics, you dumb down the nation, keep them programmed so that they don't. So you're an elitist if you get into any kind of scientific discussion. In Asia, they are very much about education. They want to send their kids to the best schools. They care about education. They have a science corner at the show, right, Sylvia?
Yeah.
They have a science corner to ask a scientist. Like they're the new rock stars. And seriously. So this is the problem.
And that's why the divers are not engaged here?
The divers who are not engaged here, it's about politics. In the dive industry, it is left versus right. There's no doubt about that, but not in other places.
So just a couple more here and then here.
Okay. So you mentioned that in other countries, people are more willing to change. Do you think that the fact that Americans aren't willing to change is due to the fact that we don't feel the effects of climate change in the same ways that other countries do, or no?
Rob Stewart, the late Rob Stewart, who did Sharkwater, Rob Stewart said, our problem is a problem of scale. We're just too darn big and it gets lost. But you're a little island and you have stuff floating up on your shoreline and you're trying to feed your kids and there's a big trawler off the shore taking all your fish. It is a problem of scale.
It's personal.
Yes, it's very personal. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. I'll make them right with Burger.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry.
One more. Maybe one more. So.
Okay, I just thank you, first of all, for doing what you're doing and making a difference in that community, because this is my daughter. My daughter's in another room. And my other daughter couldn't come. She has 2 children. But we all are part of the Surfrider Foundation, Palm Beach County chapter, and we run it. So I'm just commend you because we just started our
Ocean-friendly
Ocean Friendly Restaurant program.
Right.
And it's great, but getting that buy-in, so I'm just so curious how you did it, and I just wanted to know, do you have, when you said you teamed up with other aquariums, are there any in Florida? Because we don't spend our money in any of those places, because they do not. So do you have any
I think the
other
Florida Aquarium.
that you have
Changing the market.
in Florida?
Well, you have the Florida Aquarium, and they are not currently part of the Aquarium Conservation Partnership, but we have lots of outreach and connection to them.
Okay,
So,
just curious.
so they're certainly a good aquarium.
Okay. And then just how, really, with Pepsi, just because that's, one thing. How are you able to get that? That's such a commitment from them. I actually work for a retailer, and I won't say who, but how do you do that?
This is where the leveraging is coming into play because, we have a food service. A lot of aquariums have food service.
Correct.
And Pepsi is one, obviously it's usually Pepsi or Coke is one of your
Exactly.
vendors,
Right.
right? Well, so our food service provider is like, well, National Aquarium is going this route. Shed's going to be right behind them. The next one's going to be right behind them. So it's in scale where all of a sudden it's what we're talking about. There's a competitive advantage. There's a dent being made. If it was just us and we're starting to talk to our other destination facilities in our areas, and that's what we're encouraging the other aquariums to do so that we can create that market, so that all of a sudden it becomes a competitive advantage to create the alternative packaging, create the alternative products, because they're starting to see around the corner that, just this one entity, all right, fine, we're not going to do it for you. But all of a sudden we see there's 4 lined up right behind you that are going to be demanding the same,
Right.
and we don't want to lose all those contracts.
Is it possible to have a little knowledge about the impact of the cruise line industry on the oceans? Since this is a big issue.
Yes, let me tackle that one. We've only got a couple of minutes, and I don't want you to be late for the next session that you're going to. Cruise line industry is huge. It has grown exponentially over the last 30 years. It has changed the way people encounter the oceans. In some ways it hasn't, because the cruise ship is simply the hotel that you take with you, rather than the hotel to which you go. And so it is, I think it has had an enormous impact on people's interactions with the oceans in many ways, but it hasn't been as deep and as transformative as you might expect. Cruise ships themselves are an important driver for local economies, but you must manage them very well in order to not exceed local thresholds for sustainability. But and you have to be very careful how to manage waste discharges and other interactions with each of the local environments in which they operate. So they're a very big opportunity. They are a big opportunity for people to get involved with the ocean, but they are not one that you can simply take for granted. They require very careful attention and management in each of the locations in which they operate. We've done a number of studies on this that I've done over the years, and I'm impressed by both their size, their growth, the experience that people have, which they generally find very enjoyable, but also the potential to mess things up if you do it wrong. And they stand in that sense as kind of a quintessential part of the blue economy, to get more value out of the ocean, but to do it as carefully as possible. So with that, I'm going to call this session to end. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but I'm grateful we got to a few. And we'll be around for a couple more minutes, and head on to wherever you're headed next for your next session.